One of the things that surprised me about artificial intelligence was how much data it needed to be good at understanding human language. Now, it took me a year to learn to immerse myself in English in an English only school to be able to take high school classes in English. So I guess I took for granted how much information humans can process. So today I'm talking to an expert with data who can maybe have some context of how this all works and what it means. I'm talking to Ado Kukic. He's the Director of Developer Advocacy for DigitalOcean, one of the web's premier hosting platforms. And he has held a number of roles as a software engineer, co-founder, and lately as a developer advocate for Auth0 and MongoDB. So, Ado, how you doing? Microsoft has been going nuts with announcements this week. Last week it was ChatGPT. It looks like we're just in a different time. Talk a little bit about what surprised you the most about what's been happening with data and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ray, for having me on the show,
Mhm,
and thank you for everybody for tuning in today.
mhm,
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft Build has been all about AI. We're building AI into directly into Windows now, into all of the Office applications. I mean, we already have GitHub Copilot built
mhm.
into VS Code. And it looks like AI is front and center of the Microsoft strategy. And I think Microsoft is well suited to really dominate in this space with their history of having all of this data. I think it's going to be. I'm super super excited for it. I might have to go back to to my Windows machine that's right to the left of me.
That's true. Like I think that was one of the things as a developer, I'm watching like all their announcement. They have this thing called Dev Voxes, and they had like a lot of Copilot integration into the operating system, which is really changes the game. So I'm really curious. We were talking in the pre-show about what Apple's going to do in like a couple of weeks, because now I think Microsoft, in the same way that they threw the gauntlet at Google, who had their meeting the week before about their releases, and there's a great video on the web going around. I don't know if you've seen it, where it's Sunday Pichai. He's going like AI, 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 AI. Like every announcement was AI, and they
Uh-huh.
counted, I guess, how many times he did it, which was really hilarious. Everybody is going into it. I think that we talked about a little bit in the pre-show about how Microsoft is really going after their core product, which is search, Google's, and one of the announcement was they just threw down like the gauntlet, I think, at Apple and said, "Hey, you know what? AI is now going to be integrated into the operating system as a core experience. We're going to add plugins that are going to work in every aspect. So whether you're using ChatGPT, that's going to use plugins, and those same plugins are going to go in the operating system. We're going to put them in the marketplace. That is very smart, and it just puts Apple as I guess a warning to either, I don't know what, step it up with Siri, or I don't know what the move is. So I'll be super interested to see what happens in a couple of weeks when WWDC happens. So I don't know if you have anything else you want to add about like that the big fights that we're seeing, and some of the just people that are stepping up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I hope Apple has more than, incremental Siri improvements. I mean, Siri these days is borderline useless for any tasks. I mean, even if you compare it to like the Google Assistant or even, Amazon's Echo devices, Siri always comes last place. It's always lacking in understanding and providing useful information. So I feel like Apple really needs, to leap forward in a huge way. I don't, I'm hoping that they have something, under their sleeve to announce in a couple of weeks. But Apple is usually, very late to the game. But when they
Mm-hmm.
do show up, I mean, they show up with the big guns. But it kind of changes
Yeah.
everything.
I wonder
So
if, though, this is a time to be doing that. Like, I wonder if that model that has worked for them so well in the past, like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Tablets were like a clear example. Like, when they came up with the tablet, Microsoft had that technology for a while. But,
mhm.
Microsoft did the same thing perhaps that Apple had done, which is hold on, wait, let's perfect it. Google maybe did the same thing here. Apple. You know, what's interesting about Apple, I think, right now is that they're being very quiet. They're not saying anything. So you know that they're up to something, I think. when they're quiet, that's when they're dangerous. So, I
Yeah.
mean, WWDC, I think, like, out of all their events, you have like iPhone events, you have like iPad events, you have Apple TV events, but WWDC is a developer focus
Hmm.
conference that they have. So this is if when you should announce some sort of AI integration. So that's why I'm expecting big things in a couple of weeks. So you know, there's a lot of stuff, and some people in the chat are talking about some of them. So some people really like Microsoft Azure implementing ChatGPT is awesome. So people are already using this stuff, and like you, I have I've had a Mac since like 1984, like 1985. Like I got like a Mac Plus, still works. It's upstairs, and I was looking at like a lot of the developer focused stuff, and I have to say I do work for Microsoft technically, but I was thinking that the PCs are looking awfully nice these days. So I don't know, maybe this is a way to look. I think we may have. I think I lost Ado for a second, so he's back. So yeah, Ado, I was also drooling yesterday a little bit when I saw some of the announcements, some of their like GitHub integration. Um, yeah, it looks pretty good, right? I mean, I don't know. I For some reason I'm having a little bit of trouble getting you back into the room. But I don't. So yeah, there you are. So we were back. So
There we
yeah,
go.
I mean, you mentioned like you thought of you were looking at your PC, going, I don't know. I have a
Yeah.
Mac
No.
upstairs that's actually a PC. It's like my PC is a Mac now.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. They really for somebody that's always had a Mac, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna ever use a PC, but understanding that I do work for Microsoft, I've still kept a Mac because they've been always been Mac
Yeah.
friendly. So what are your thoughts about that? Like, are you considering a switch? I
Uh,
mean, what's the deal?
I mean, so I have been a Windows user for pretty much my whole life. I mean, I've always preferred Windows devices, desktops, just because, I felt they were much more versatile.
Hmm.
And this year, eventually, I was convinced to go. My desktop it's aging. I think the last time I built it was 2019, like right before the pandemic. So it's kind of starting to show its age a little bit. And I was itching for something new, and I said, the new M2 MacBooks came out, and I was like, okay,
Very nice.
I've
Yes.
been convinced. I've slowly moved, like I have the Apple Watch, the iPhone, like Apple
Hmm.
TVs throughout the house. So I'm like, let's integrate everything into one. So I got the new MacBook a couple months ago. It's been my main daily driver. I still have my Windows machine, kind of as a backup. But now I'm seeing all these things come out with OpenAI. Microsoft is killing it with all the integrations, and I'm like, man, did I make a mistake? Should I go back and
I know what you mean. Like, you are right though. The M2s, like the M chips, are an amazing advance. Like, it just really hit everybody that they came up with something super powerful and unique. This entire my setup is basically a Mac Mini that runs like an M2 chip,
Mhm.
and it's unbelievable how talented it is. But like web development, like how much do you actually need? You're not rendering 3D. I mean, in this world where everybody's doing video, you do need something super beefy. So that's why I have this. But
Mhm.
for developers, it's generally very low sort of processing power that you need. So interesting. So up until like GPT-4 was launched, I think one of the biggest things that people were talking about was the size of the models. GPT-3 was 175 billion parameters, and it doesn't seem to be so much a part of the conversation anymore. So can you talk a little bit about coming from a company that has hundreds of thousands of customers and deals with a lot of data? Can you talk a little bit about the surprising role of data in this new age?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, just to kind of throw back what you mentioned earlier, it took you about a year to really understand English and like the human language and like get good at it. I
Rough
think
year.
it's
I have to tell you, it's a rough first year. Well,
I bet.
the only classes that I could take were like English, which I took a lot of. Like imagine like six English classes, and then I actually was able to take math. So funnily
Yeah.
enough, but anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. Keep going. Sorry.
No, I mean I have a kind of a similar background. Originally, I'm from Bosnia, and my family moved to the
Mm,
U.S. when I was 9 years old. And I spoke very rudimentary English, but within a year, just being exposed to English nonstop in school and like ESL classes and things like that, it was amazing how quickly you pick it up and it becomes just natural.
hmm
Yeah, I mean it was amazing to see that.
Yeah. So
uh,
was it surprising to you, like the amount, like that's what I'm thinking, like because were immersed and we learned from every piece of data that we received from the environment was English. And I know we talked to Lila Tretikov, like she's a deputy CTO from Microsoft. She came to the country. I think she was 15, and she didn't know. She said that when people said anything to her, she would just smile and nod and had no idea what they were saying. She
uh,
would say something, like she would say her name, and then whatever people replied, she would just like smile and pretend like she understood them. And I can relate to some of that. But what is it about these new systems that require so much information in order to sort of understand what it took us a year, but it seems like we didn't need that
yeah.
many billions of pieces of data, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we definitely didn't have 175 billion
Like
exposures
we're
to the English to the
yes.
language before we learned it. But with ChatGPT 3, they said they had 175 billion parameters. ChatGPT 4, um, I think that there were some information out there saying there was like in the trillions. I think Sam Altman came out and kind of denied that. They never really said what
Mm.
their training data looked at, but they said it was
You assume
about
it's
six.
bigger. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, it was about 6 times what
Whew.
GPT-3 was, so about a trillion parameters. And the more data you have, the more examples you have, the better you can kind of try to get a grasp or understanding of like what the language is, what you can do with it, and how you can kind of repurpose it to create similar, um, similar examples or similar outputs. And that's really all that makes it really important. And also having that larger data set
hmm
also comes with like a larger understanding. So with GPT-4, with GPT-3 and 3.5, I think we were limited to about 4,000 tokens. So when you would give it a prompt or you would give it some sample data to work with, you were limited to 4,000 tokens, which ends up being about 15 or so thousand words, and that's
hmm
for both your input and the output that gets that GPT comes out with as well. With GPT-4, they have a model that goes up to 32,000 tokens,
hmm
which allows you, over like 150,000 words. So you could basically take a whole, documentation site, for example, or you could take, an entire book, feed it into ChatGPT 4 and ask questions about it, ask for insights, ask for rewrites. And that's really powerful. I mean, the more data you have, the better understanding that the model can have and the better output you can have at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's really interesting that it takes that much data to just understand the language, and then you start sort of having to even train it. Like, the interesting thing to me about what happened with these LLMs is that, uh, when they make mistakes and they have hallucinations, I think part of it has to do with the nature of language. Like, you take language for granted, but the machines don't quite understand that, you're not supposed to make things up when you talk to somebody. Like, maybe that was part of it. Like, we hear about the ethical things, but we were like, okay, well, just don't make numbers up or don't make information up. That's kind of a clear thing about getting all this reflection of humanity, I think, has been understanding that, yeah, there's a little bit of training that, every child needs in order to understand not just how to, understand human language, but how to use it ethically. and we have had to go through in a way with that,
Yeah.
with these models and stuff.
And I think like one interesting example of that is like I saw this post a few weeks back saying that GPT is terrible at math, and
Mm,
it was a guy doing a like a big multiplication problem where it was like 3,842 times 2,714, which a calculator would figure out in an instant. It would be
hmm
right 100% of the time. But with GPT, like you give it that prompt and it looks at the numbers and it like guessed the first number and the last number correctly, but then in the middle it was like it was totally wrong, and that's because it wasn't trying to solve a problem. It was like just creating content based on the sample data that it had. So it might have gotten it right, but in
hmm
that case it didn't, and it was just showing that at the end of the day these are large language models. It's recreating data based on what it has. It's not it's not thinking on its own. It's not creating
hmm
new thought. It's just kind of repurposing what it already understands, but it's not thinking in like the general sense, or problem solving.
Yeah, it's like a large language model, not necessarily a large computer model or a
Yeah.
calculator model. So it does have trouble with some things that I think we take for granted, and how you have to have different mental models for different tasks, and sometimes the language part where it's really predictive. It's trying to figure out what comes next. It doesn't work for certain things. However, some of those things are getting better. Now, companies are pretty excited about what they can do with these tools. So everybody, including the Google folks, are talking about AI, AI, AI. Now, your company has more than 600,000 customers. How are they looking at taking advantage of AI in their own businesses?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things that comes with all of this AI hype is that at the end of the day, you still need traditional infrastructure. You still need traditional technologies to leverage, you know, whether you're calling, OpenAI, or you're using, image generation, text generation, video generation, whatever you're using, you still at the end of the day need servers, need infrastructure, need traditional programming languages
hmm
to really leverage that capability. And one thing that we at DigitalOcean have been seeing a lot more lately is companies are leveraging third-party APIs like OpenAI, like Stability and DALI and all of those, to enhance their existing applications, or build brand new classes of applications leveraging third parties, as opposed to a year or 2 years ago, where the big the big desire was, hey, we need GPUs, we want to train our own models, we want to build our own large language models, and we need the infrastructure capability to do so. I
hmm
feel like that there's been a pretty drastic shift over the last 6 months to these technologies are already proven, they're out there, we can leverage them today without spending years, months and months and years on building our own infrastructure and building our own models. Now, that's not to say that we should you know entirely abandon existing models just because OpenAI exists and it might be better today. I think there's still a lot of use cases for specialized models, for specialized
hmm
technologies that, and people will continue to build on those. But I think OpenAI has really, it has shown that aha moment of like, AI is here, it works really well, and you can use it for a wide variety of purposes today, and that's what
hmm
we're seeing a lot of customers take advantage of. But they
Yeah,
still
and they
need
are
that.
there's definitely like a real hunger for sort of figuring out how does this work for me, making sure that the data is protected. We saw some instances of like Samsung releasing some IP into the world by using their employees using ChatGPT. Apple, I think last week announced that they were preventing their, restricting the use of GPT internally. So I thought that's pretty interesting. I think that's maybe the first big company that I've seen that has said, hey, maybe we need to make sure that everybody, like of all companies, Apple, of course, they're very secretive. So of
Mhm.
all companies, you would expect them to sort of lead in that sense. So that's definitely, a way that businesses, I guess, especially would be concerned about those sort of things. So one of the things that we have heard about that's really hot in the world is this concept of vector databases. I don't know if you've heard a lot about them. I'm sure you have. I mean, there is sort of a different infrastructure for databases, which is really interesting to me because, I don't know. It feels to me like it's the people that would use this would be the companies with like large language models, which I feel like it's six clients that need that need like vector databases, but everybody is going nuts. I still think that something like MongoDB or SQL, you've done courses on MongoDB. So can you talk a little bit about your understanding of maybe how this thing is different and who should be maybe looking at this sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And vector databases, that the way that they work is they store data, basically, arrays of numbers with embeddings for the understanding of the data set. So, if you have a large data set of, let's say textual data, you can import that in the database. It'll break up the words
Hmm.
into numbers, and then it'll figure out the relations between those numbers, between the words and strings, and really help you kind of categorize how your language model looks like, and also help you create inferences of, if you're saying, that the sentence is, hey, I'm a cat. Well, okay, so a cat is an animal, it belongs here. So, you're probably talking about, animals. And so we can build that correlation. Um,
So is that what
maybe
you're
maybe that
talking
would.
about? Then the numbers that you were mentioning, is that what relate to the tokens that we heard about the parameters and all that stuff?
Yeah, exactly. So like the way that most of the large language models work is they break up text into tokens. And essentially the way that that works is it takes, each token essentially is about 4 bytes of data. So, one word could be multiple tokens, or, it could be less than a token. So you tokenize your input, you tokenize your training data set, and assign it numerical values. And then you can combine or you can compare those numerical values with other numerical values in the data set to kind of try to get an understanding of how relevant they are, how closely related they are, how different they are, and then using, at the end of the day, I think a lot of machine learning, a lot of the AI right now is really just, statistics and math. So
Hmm.
combining those two to figure out inferences, figure out similarities, and get a better understanding of the data. Now, so I think the use case for vector databases is there for companies that are leveraging AI technologies. Um, just because you want to use the right tool for the job, and I think whether you have MySQL or NoSQL, graph database experience. I mean, all of those databases are really good at specific use cases, and some are better at particular use cases, others are better at other ones. So I think vector databases are, might be a really great solution for AI related,
Hmm.
large language model, machine learning, uh, and similar use cases. So, I personally haven't worked with Pinecone. That's one of the ones that you
Hmm.
just showed a couple minutes ago. But it's definitely something I'm itching to try. But I don't think, I don't see us as developers, changing our infrastructures to use vector databases anytime soon. I do think it's going to be limited to companies that are leveraging AI. And as more and more companies start leveraging AI, I think we'll see a greater adoption and more use cases come out of these databases.
Yeah, so I think that we understand that the huge thing with these large language models is the tokenization of language. Language is what is being understood by ChatGPT and other things. So as I understand these like vector databases, they understand. It's almost like the way that MP3 compresses audio is it understands what humans can actually listen to. When you listen to something, there's a lot of data in there that is not the most important, so it knows kind of to remove that or compress that really well. So in the same way, I think these vector databases appear to understand that in language, like you have words, things that are used very often, but perhaps don't have a ton of meaning. So like is or are, like that has a certain effect, but maybe some of the words in a sentences are the key words that will bring those together. And it's able to sort of group things in a way that makes it easier, like for retrieval, and I
Yep.
think that that's why what it does is give you additional performance, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for those, yeah.
Exactly. And like, maybe another, more concrete example is with like image generation, right? If you're using like Midjourney or
Hmm.
Dolly to generate images, in the database, you might have, specific art styles, whether it's like pixel art or, 8-bit art or vector art. If you have enough examples of those, you break it down again into arrays of numbers that represent, different art styles, different structures, different, whether it's, art of people or of buildings or of nature. And then
Hmm.
if those tokens are stored in the proper database where they can easily and quickly be retrieved, then your future generations, prompts, image generation, and things like that work much faster and with much greater accuracy. So again, it's just taking existing data, whether it's strings of text or
Hmm.
images, pixels that make up an image, breaking them into statistical models and making those models very easy to retrieve. And that's something that isn't necessarily impossible with traditional databases. Like, Postgres has a PG vector extension that kind of helps you work with vector data in a Postgres database. And I'm sure MongoDB um, you know, has a similar thing, or, you could kind of build it on top of MongoDB if you wanted to, but it wasn't built for that purpose, so you're never going to get the performance you might out of a specialized tool that's built, around this one specific use case. And traditional databases, I think they're very good at storing and retrieving existing data. But
Hmm.
anytime you're doing anything, if you're doing aggregations or trying to create new insights out of your existing data, it's much more strenuous. It takes more CPU cycles. It's more resource intensive. Whereas I think, with vector databases, the way that they're heading is, they're optimized for that specific use case of getting new data out of the existing data set.
Yeah, so just in the same way that I think Apple focused on not just processing power, but energy consumption as it relates to processing power, I think that what we're seeing is we need to make, these AIs faster because they're really slow. They struggle with the amount of stuff that they have to process. So we need to be more energy efficient and better at, getting this data, and anything that can help with that is great. Vector databases, oftentimes you see sort of ideas that eventually will get absorbed into other technologies, as you mentioned. So the fact that you see this new shiny thing, perhaps if you're a company who was involved in like deep learning, large language models, that's a great thing. But if you're just doing your traditional business sort of infrastructure, perhaps it isn't necessarily something that you have to jump into the latest thing just because it's
Yeah.
there. Hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't
So
recommend necessarily, betting everything on vector databases or feeling like you need to be an expert today, but definitely something to keep on your radar. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of great tutorials coming out, maybe
yeah.
some stuff from LinkedIn as well on how to work with these databases.
So totally. So what's your perspective on some of the effects that these AIs are having on jobs, specifically, I guess, developer jobs? Have you seen developers like maybe in your company adopt tools like Copilot, Bard, ChatGPT? How is that affecting, like, as a developer, the people that you see?
Yeah, I mean, as a developer, I definitely see us adopting a lot of these tools. Like I use, Copilot almost on a daily basis. I use
Hmm.
ChatGPT almost every day for my everyday work for, non-sensitive things. Like we kind of have a similar policy at DigitalOcean where we're not allowed to, use Copilot or use ChatGPT on anything that's, private, anything that's internal. But, in my role, I do a lot of, content creation or a lot of tutorials that are
Hmm.
going to be public anyway. So in that case, leveraging Copilot, leveraging ChatGPT, to create, to just help me either brainstorm, create,
Hmm.
or explain things in a slightly different way is really, really helpful, and I think it's made me a lot more productive. And same with my team. I mean, I encourage them to use these tools where they can help you. I still think like I think it's a little overblown that like to say that Copilot or ChatGPT is going to take your job because it can spit out correct looking code. I think you still need to understand what the code does. And I tried it. So I have a very rudimentary understanding of Rust, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
I challenged myself. I think last or 2 weeks ago, over the weekend, I was like, I want to build and deploy a Rust application. I mean, I know the language, I kind of know the syntax, but I've never really built and deployed any real application with Rust. So I was like, I'm just going to use ChatGPT. I'm not going to use any outside sources.
Hmm.
I'll use, VS Code and ChatGPT and see if I could build and deploy a Rust application. And I was able to do the basics, and I can say like, hey, I need a web server, like, what do you recommend? Can you show me an example of building a simple server with Axiom? It's like a very popular like server or web framework in the Rust community. And
Hmm.
it gave me correct looking code, but then when I pasted it in VS Code, all the errors started showing up. And then it was like, okay, let me try to debug this one. So I'm going to go back to ChatGPT, paste the error, and say, oh, this isn't working. Can you help me? And eventually I was able to build and deploy a simple web API that had a couple of endpoints connected to a database, and the application worked. But I definitely, like, without really understanding a lot of the underlying, because I feel like a lot of web development concepts will translate whether you're doing it in Node or Go or
Hmm.
Rust. The concepts don't change, but the way that you do it do. So having that understanding really helped me to deploy the application. But if I didn't know anything about programming, like, I would have been lost after
Hmm.
after the second prompt.
Yeah, one of the
So
things that I really appreciated from Sam Altman's, like he was in Congress last week talking to, the senators, I think it was, and I appreciated seeing that just because a lot of them were like, listen, we don't know anything about this stuff, but just tell us what you think we need to do. But one of the things he said is that AI is good at tasks, not jobs.
yeah,
So it can help you, you know, figure out how to do something, or it can maybe, like I definitely use Stack Overflow a lot less than I used to. I don't know about you.
hmm
And, it's easier to look things up, and it's, if you know what you're doing, can really be an accelerator to get you to where you're going faster. Or even if you're, like you said, if you're doing another computer language, most of it is figuring out, say I did something in Python for the first time like a while back with this ChatGPT and Copilot, and because I understand how to program, it wasn't a big stretch. Oh, I need to indent. Here's how the loops work. Here's the command to achieve this, like to retrieve some data, and it was able to write some things for me, and just get me there a lot quicker. Where it would have been a lot of, I had a wall full of books when I was growing up, and reference
yeah.
books on like PHP and SQL and HTML and whatever. Like I don't feel like I need that anymore. I don't know if it's had an effect on you personally,
Yeah.
in looking things up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the one thing I really appreciate about ChatGPT is being able to explain my issue exactly. Like, I'm a big Stack Overflow user, and sometimes you'll have an issue, you'll ask a question, and you'll get a really good response, or somebody already asked a very similar question. But
Hmm.
most of it, something that's similar to what you're doing, and you have to like read the response, understand it, and then apply it back to your to your problem, to your bug, to your issue. With ChatGPT, I can paste exactly my issue and get an answer,
Hmm.
with 15, 20 seconds of like, hey, you're doing this thing wrong, or you forgot to include so and so. So it's like much more, it's almost like having a personalized, tutor, or like a personalized
Hmm.
coach that kind of addresses your issue in the moment. And for a variety, I would say like 90% plus cases for me, it does give me the right solution, the first or second time. So in that way, it's made me much more productive, whereas I would spend, 30, 45 minutes, searching the web, looking at Stack Overflow, trying to understand the
Hmm.
example. now I can fix that in 5 6 minutes max.
Yeah, which is great. Which is really, I think you can immediately see the benefits of it as you start using it. You also immediately get to see that sometimes it just it just makes things up. You're like, okay, that's not even
Yeah.
good code. I mean, I don't know how it would be if you're a very like green beginner to get a result that you don't know it's wrong. Like how frustrating that would be that you're no, I'm doing it exactly like you're telling me to do it, and try giving it some CSS. It's really not that great, and it also like one of the things that's been a big issue is that remember it's working from data from 2011, like September 2011 or whatever it is. So like
Yeah.
it's not going to know the latest, React methods. It's not going to know about concurrency. Like it's you're writing old code, and that can be dangerous for a developer, like not knowing that there's a better way or a safer way if you're getting some pretty old code. Now, I did see this interesting article about how AI robots are now changing tires in the US in half the time as humans. So I think we're going to see some impacts. Of course, like, this little machine here probably costs $500,000. Like,
Yeah, right.
so, I mean, can it do things faster? Yes. It's not practical, maybe. It's still like they were saying that the Formula One personnel can do it way quicker, but a lot of manufacturing is just done by machines now, and you're seeing it definitely have an impact. And I think it's going to have an impact. It's going to, I think, generate a lot more opportunities. And the way that I like to describe it is, it's just going to it's going to allow people to do more. So if you're an editor, like say, you mentioned doing, a lot of tutorials and things for people. Think about like all of the carpenters on YouTube that are also
Yeah.
video editors, or the whatever you pick a thing like somebody that likes, I don't know, racing or whatever, and they want to have a channel. Now they have to become also a filmmaker and editor and understand those things. If you eliminate some of the friction there, what you're going to end up seeing is that now everybody will have the ability to do those things, to do the thing that is not necessarily, as a communicator, it's not necessarily the fun part to take all the ums and ahs or something out of an audio track. But
Yep.
something like Descript can do that like immediately, and it just save a lot of time. It is going to
Yep.
affect jobs, but the way that I think it's going to affect jobs is you're not going to have less editors. They're just going to be able to do 10 times what they're able to do today and be cheaper. So I think that's really the exciting part of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of like a side project that a friend and I started, leveraging GPT for is it's called Video Tap. And
Mm-hmm.
as content creators, we love creating videos. We love creating, YouTube, whether it's a video or like a course, but we hate writing, or writing blog posts is can be a little tedious. So with Video Tap, what we allow you to do is basically, give us a YouTube video, give us a course video, and we'll transcribe it for you and then generate a high quality blog post out of the video. So rather than you having to,
I hope
write,
hopefully I'm pulling the right thing
record.
up.
Yep, that's
Hopefully
it.
this is not your competitor or something. Yeah. Yeah.
No, but essentially, allowing you to optimize for uh, reusing your content in multiple places at
Mm-hmm.
once. So you create a YouTube video, you get a blog post, you get social media clips, chapters,
Chapters.
social
Wow,
media
that's
posts,
cool.
things like that. Um, and it's all powered by OpenAI. It's all powered by ChatGPT, and we use databases, traditional databases under the hood. We use, I think it's built on Laravel. So we're using kind of old school technologies to really um, allow developers and allow content creators to leverage their content in multiple ways.
Wow, that's awesome. I think I feel like I need this in my life because I mean that's the thing. Also, the way I've been using ChatGPT and OpenAI is for this show. I have to do after the show notes. I also do the conversion into like an audio podcast. So that
Hmm.
requires like, I use Descript to like cut all the ums and ahs and make like a shorter, tighter version, add like an intro. But for the show notes, I have to summarize. I run the thing through like a happy scribe or something that gives you the text, and then
Uh-huh.
I try to feed that into ChatGPT. And I use some other tools as well. So this looks fantastic. Wow, that's got to be quite an experience to actually be developing with ChatGPT. How was that for you?
Uh, so much fun. I mean, just seeing building new API endpoints that allow us to, add new functionality like, Twitter threads was something that a lot of customers asked for, and it was like, can we build it? How long is it gonna take? And we sat down and just, created a very rudimentary prompt. It was like, hey, here's this transcript. Can you give us, a Twitter thread? And just from that simple prompt, it gave us like an 80% really good
Mm,
output almost every single time. Then it was like, okay, let's optimize for like, let's get it to 95%. So let's change the prompt around. Let's, add some, mess around with the OpenAI, with the temperature, with the top E, with like all of the
hmm
parameters we could to really optimize and make it a high quality, as high quality as it can be. And right now, we have over 2,000 users on it. I think there's almost 4,700 blog posts created from it. The majority of them have been very, very good, like 95% ready to publish. But of course, it's AI. It's a large language model at the end of the day. So sometimes it will spit out complete gibberish, and it's like, hey, I gave you this, and I got something totally totally different out of it.
Crazy.
And so we're always trying to kind of optimize for that as well.
Yeah, you were talking about the basically the ChatGPT sort of playground type of place that lets you kind of play with some of the parameters. I think the one thing that people will be, if you haven't done it yet, one of the things that'll be surprising to people is that it's the API is surprisingly easy to work with. And I think, like I
Very.
said, once you can develop like the proper system message and the proper prompts, you are most of the way there. Just like with anything else, there's a little bit of tuning that has to be done, but it's not as difficult as you think it is. The API is super simple. And I think that, case in point, the fastest growing product in the history of mankind was ChatGPT. And Sam Altman in one of the interviews said, that they built that because it seemed like a very obvious product. It's not like a life changing product. Like you don't think that ChatGPT, wow, what a it's not Photoshop. Like it's not like this fantastic like application that takes decades to develop. Like any developer could make something like that in a few minutes. And so the interesting thing is that the engine is what makes it possible for you to do things with it. So many opportunities for developers and other people to like create new products, and now we have like that ability of people to add plugins, which makes things more interesting. But yeah, so another hot topic that we ran into is the concept of regulation. So you saw countries, for example, like Italy, preventing people, at least for a while, to use ChatGPT in their own countries. And we saw, other issues that arose. So for example, Google temporarily prevented people like in the EU and Canada from using some of these things. So in your opinion, like what's the right sort of balance between regulation and growing technology?
Yeah, I think this is really, really an excellent question, and I think it's a question that doesn't have an easy answer. Just because from the technology side, I am I love what OpenAI is doing. Like it's made my life so much better, so much more productive. But I do understand the need for some sort of regulation, and what that regulation looks like. I'm not entirely sure. I don't think I'm fully qualified to
Mm,
say, but I think definitely what we need is transparency, both from
mm,
the creators of these large language models, as well as the government bodies that want to regulate them, and kind of sharing with the public, what those rules are, what the standards are. And I think transparency will go a long way in kind of establishing trust. establishing trust with,
Hmm.
you know, learning the capabilities, like what these large language models can do, what they can't do, because it is very scary, when you show somebody, ChatGPT for the first time and it can do all of these things, and you're like, oh crap, am I going to be out of a job tomorrow? ChatGPT now is taking care of all of the, drive-through orders. I think I saw that uh, an article a few days ago where they're using, you know, I'm not sure if it's ChatGPT, but they're using AI now, where when you go and place an order at the drive-through, they're using a,
Yes.
language model
Thank goodness.
to
That was like my first job, so I can really relate to number one, like not understanding sometimes the people, like the microphones are horrible, very cheap, and also just, from the customer's perspective, like not being able to understand everything. As long as they don't put Siri behind the order taker. Like it's not Siri like understanding it's really bad. But yeah, I think that could be really helpful. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so I do think some sort of regulation is needed, but I don't think an outright ban, because I don't think that there is going back. Like you can't take this technology and lock it away and say like, hey, this isn't, we're not going to do this anymore, because if we don't do it, like, if good companies don't leverage this technology or make it available, I feel like malicious actors will. So it's always going to be that game of, cat and mouse. And, if you ban something, it's not going to necessarily, go away. It's just people that, don't care about the rules are going to leverage it.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing is that you want to sort of try to balance that, and my own problem with regulations is always like bad people don't care about regulations. So when you regulate, you tend to regulate the people who are trying to do something reasonable. I do think we need it. I think that the best thing we could do right now is honestly just listen to the people that understand the technology, and try to make sure that you're not, just basically. Sometimes regulation can give individuals like the big companies more power that don't allow for experimentation. So just be careful there. Make sure you don't watch that. You don't, quell that. And what would happen if we had too much regulation? Like we've seen maybe in Italy and the EU and Canada that some of it does affect the ability of technologies to innovate. It's like a crazy thing because I'm like always like in between. I think these things. I always think yes, we need it. Be careful because it can screw things up. But then I go from not being concerned at all about what AI is going to do to like having like Terminator dreams. Oh my gosh, it's going to eliminate
Right.
everyone one day because it decides that, like when the order taking system will take like I don't know flatten your car like So it's such a difficult time too because everything's moving so fast that it's just crazy. So what is the right approach? It's not like you said. I don't feel qualified to be able to say because it can be used in a number of nefarious ways. But then again, like those people are going to do what they're gonna do. They're gonna there's not, no regulation is gonna stop them. So I don't know. I don't know. I keep
Exactly.
going.
And
I keep
yeah, I mean, I think the Skynet thing, somebody just mentioned it, and you
yeah.
mentioned it as well. It's like, could that be a possibility? I think it could, but I think there's more of a possibility of a Skynet type event happening, behind closed doors than if it's, built out in the open, if it's transparent, if it's if we kind of know and understand the capabilities of these technologies, whether it's large language models, neural nets, any sort of technology in this field, I think just more general education is needed for
Mm.
the general populace, um, to really understand, like, hey, this is just a language model that's, to sum it down to like the most rudimentary information. It's like, hey, it just takes input and produces output. It doesn't really, it's not doing anything other than
Mm.
figuring out how to, generate text. But who knows
Right
what that's
now,
going to be
right
like
now.
in a
Wait until
year.
they add that Wendy's AI order. It's gonna go rogue. It's gonna go rogue. So yeah, I mean, like the next step in the kind of evolution of AIs is this thing called an AGI, the artificial general intelligence, that is basically able to perform any task that humans can do. Do you think that's going to happen? Is it going to happen really quick? I mean, people are even confused right now as to the Turing test that was so fundamental to artificial intelligence. It got trounced on really quick by these AIs because I think that the thing that they're doing is they have the ability to to duplicate language so well that they can replicate a person, but they're not really a person. They're just like an LLM. You can mathematically figure that out. Anything keeping you up at night, Ado?
Right. I mean, I think we are very much in the wild west of AI right now, and yeah, I think there is a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding of what the current technologies are. I think when it comes to like AGI and a large language model or any sort of technology being able to do anything that a human can do, I feel like ChatGPT, and we've seen a couple of open source projects that kind of allow you to, have ChatGPT take over your bank account and or do tasks for you that it wasn't maybe necessarily built to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think without you know any sort of agency, without ChatGPT or a large language model having clear defined intentions or clearly defined goals, I don't think that's general intelligence. If it doesn't have a motivation other than
Mm-hmm.
what you tell it to do, you know, is it really doing it on its own? I mean, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like no. Um, but we've seen such an explosion over the last 6 months, really, with all of these capabilities unlocked. Like right now we have plugin support where you can talk to Zillow, talk to Instacart, generate a shopping list, which as a human you could do, and the
Mm-hmm.
AI just makes it much faster for you. But is it doing that because it's smart, or is it doing it because you said, hey, I need I need
Yeah.
groceries for the week, and it figures out, hey, you probably need some protein, some carbs, and but
Yeah. I mean,
the one thing. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, like, the one thing that does, potentially keep me up at night is, malicious actors utilizing this technology. I mean, we've seen, um, or I've heard of reports of like, people using voice cloning technology and then,
Mm-hmm.
calling elderly parents of, your child and saying, hey, we have your kid, and, playing a voice recording of, your son or daughter saying something that sounds exactly like them, and, getting, elderly folks to send you thousands of dollars or things like that. So that's the one thing that does keep me up at night is people misusing this technology for nefarious purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't think this technology should be banned. I think just more more education, more information
Mm-hmm.
needs to happen. So that's
Yeah.
that's the one caveat.
We we had Diana Kelly a few in one of the earlier episodes a few weeks ago talking about that specifically and how you should have perhaps consider if you have a family, you have children, consider having a safe word so that nobody else knows, so that even if somebody calls you and they sound exactly like your kids, you can verify, whatever the safe word is that that you can,
Mhm.
that you can stay safe in that fashion. But there's AIs are a little bit like people. They can be used for nefarious purposes. There was a great story in that Diana Kelly interview about this hero dog in France that was saving kids out of the river.
Oh,
And which he said was that the first time it saved a kid, somebody gave it like a cheesesteak, and then a few weeks later or whatever, the dog did the same thing, and eventually they realized that the dog was actually pushing the kids into the river
yep.
in order to get in order to get foods. I think we see kind of a spark of that in AI when it starts hallucinating, like it wants to give you an answer, but it doesn't know that it's not supposed to just make something up. Kind of like people
Right.
do that sometimes; they just make things up.
Of
So
course.
yeah, I think those are the dangers, and hopefully, we'll find sensible ways to talk about them. So there's a lot of really fantastic news. We don't have a ton of time left, so let me just run through some of the articles that I found here. So I loved this thing that happened a while back where like Elon Musk said that we need to pause AI, and then like a week later, he's like, "Oh, I'm also, by the way, working on my own AI." Like,
Right.
what a move! What a move! To like do both things at the same time. That that some people say you need to pause it and until it's more responsible. I don't know. Like I feel like, yeah, you pause it now and somebody's gonna continue to work on it. Nobody, it's
Right.
unstoppable. So we need to try to address issues as quickly as they appear, but understand that it's not gonna slow down. It's not slowing down. It's not that huge sort of thing that so many people signed up didn't slow it down a bit. Nobody did, nobody slowed down, especially Elon,
Yeah.
who actually asked about it. So another interesting article that I found was this article about there's a skills gap like in AI. Only 1 in 10 global workers have these key AI skills. There's a real hunger for this type of sort of knowledge of not necessarily from our perspective. It's all about developers understanding how to use it, but from people's perspective is what is this? How do I use it? I mean, I think we kind of forget that, if you talk to a relative that doesn't work in the industry, like they don't know what this is. Like they don't know what it's good for. So there's definitely some sort of skill gap, which is I guess good for us. I guess we do training most of the time.
Right.
Then demand for AI skills on freelance services website Fiverr skyrockets. I thought that was like another interesting article that yeah, people are looking for this. So like what I say to people, how long will the AI boom last? What I always say is like, listen, if you're a technologist, uh, the great thing about a development like this is that there are no experts right now. There aren't, you can't, there's probably already jobs out there with like 10 years experience with AGIs and like ChatGPT, like the normal meme that it's like, as soon as a job comes out, they want you to have like 8 years of experience. There is no one right now with a ton of experience. So you could be the expert if you apply
Yep.
yourself to like learning the technology. So, yeah, what do you think about
Absolutely.
these?
And I think, and I think that there's also a huge, misunderstanding of what AI skills are. I think that there's this like XKCD comic a
Oh yeah.
while back.
Hmm.
It was like, I need you to, build me a map or build me an app that identifies if the user is, in a national park. And the guy's like, yeah, okay, that'll take a week. And he's like, okay, and then I need you to identify, like, if I take a picture of a bird, what bird it is. And he's like, okay, I'll need a science team and, 3 years of research and $2 million. And it was like, okay, why is that so much more
Yes.
difficult? So,
Yeah, I think it's this one, right? This is the one you're talking about. When a user takes a
yep,
photo, the app should check whether they're in a national park. Sure, easy. GIS lookup, give me a few hours. And check whether the photo is of a bird. It says, I'll need a research team in 5 years. Yeah, because
yep.
it's some things like, right now these models just take so much data and we're not used to like the whole world doesn't quite understand what is going on with everything. So again, you don't look at it as something that should hinder you. This is a fantastic opportunity. I mean, I'm super impressed with you having already built an app that you're far ahead most developers who are even wondering if they're allowed to like install, ChatGPT and Copilot. So more of that from your end. Okay, I did want to talk a little bit about your DigitalOcean. They've been, a huge leader in the web development industry, and I'm not trying to just make you feel good that you work there and everything. I've seen them almost throughout my entire like developer career. Talk a little bit about what you guys do, and then maybe a little bit about some of the adjustments that you're making for this new age.
Yeah, definitely. DigitalOcean, like one of our, pillars and tenets that we live by is, our developer community. Like we've, over the last 10 years, we have published tens of thousands of tutorials on Linux, on infrastructure, on building, uh, on helping developers understand how to build web applications, how to get on the internet, And we've given all of this content away for free. The vast majority of it has very little to do with with our core infrastructure, hosting. Obviously we would love for you to build and deploy your application on DigitalOcean, and we have virtual servers, we have serverless
Hmm.
platforms, they basically everything you would need to get on the cloud. But for us, developer like DO love is something that we really take into consideration with everything that we do. And our community site, our tutorials, they're really meant to help developers upskill, learn, and grow into the developers that they want to be. And with ChatGPT, with AI, I mean it's a constant conversation these days of like, hey, are we seeing less and less people come to the DO properties because they can get the answers on, you know, they can just go to ChatGPT, ask a
Hmm.
question, get an answer. Um, but we still think, our value proposition is that we have a lot of really good, documentation. And I'm sure, OpenAI used a lot of our our articles because they are publicly available in the training data set. So that actually has also given us a one up.
I think we temporarily lost Ado for some reason, so I apologize about that. Really good talk with him. Yeah, one of the things while he comes back, one of the things that was really interesting and also that I really appreciated from all the work that you guys have been doing, Ado, is this concept of like this, this purchase that you guys did with CSS tricks not long ago. What tell I mean, it does sound like it's aligned with you guys, but how is that going? Can you tell me a little bit about why? I mean, it seems clear that you guys are a company that's sort of super hyper focused on developers. So can you talk a little bit about that before we go off?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and sorry about that. I keep getting disconnected for some reason, but
It's probably the
essentially,
AI bots. Yeah.
could be they don't like what I'm
This is
saying.
too good. Yes.
Um, No, but I was going to say, DigitalOcean has done a number of content acquisitions over the last couple of years. We purchased Scotch.io, which was a property really loved by developers. We've, purchased Alligator and Journal Dev and properties like that.
Hmm.
And then about 2 years ago, DigitalOcean launched a product called App Platform, which allowed developers to get on the net, deploy applications without needing to understand infrastructure, without having to set up, Nginx or,
Hmm.
any servers. We basically, you connect your GitHub repo and, we figure out what type of application you're building, whether it's Node, PHP, Ruby, whatever. We deploy a container for it. We manage all of the networking, the scalability. So App Platform was meant to be, the easy way to deploy your applications. And the CSS tricks audience, there are a lot of it is front end design, front end development, and our thinking there was, there's, Chris Coyer has built CSS tricks over the last 10 years to have, very, very high quality content, something that aligns exactly with what DigitalOcean's content strategy is. So it seemed like a really great partnership. And, we were hoping that developers would learn about App Platform through CSS tricks, and we would be able to get more people deploying, building, and getting in front of their customers via DigitalOcean. So that was kind of the crux for acquiring CSS tricks.
That's cool. I tried looking for alligator, and I live in Florida, so the Google's just giving me whatever, all kinds of great pictures. But so if you don't mind, like, just make sure you send me the links, and I'll make sure that I add them to the show notes so people can find all the other resources. And I don't know. I mean, right now CSS Tricks, it's front and center that you guys, are involved with them. I don't think the quality of the content has changed at all. And it's really good to see the sort of support for the community that I think is shows a big difference, in companies that do that. So everybody, I think, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming into the show, Otto. I gotta look up that tool that you were talking about. Just a couple of show notes to close up the thing. We have a lot of different ways that you can find the show, and we have specifically a page on LinkedIn Also, a newsletter with the show notes. The nice thing is, if you didn't have a chance to listen to the whole episode, you can subscribe to it, and you get an email with the episode. You can watch the video there. It has all the links, like I said, that we discussed, and others that we didn't get to. Then there's also a YouTube playlist, as well as the episode guide, which is basically lets you see all of the previous shows if you want to check out the show with Diana Kelly about cybersecurity. If you want to check out, we talked about Lila Trechakov, who learn English like both of us. Apparently, I'm inviting a lot of us English as a second language people to the show. It's sort of like a theme, so that's great. And then we also have the audio version of this podcast, which you will get to see all of the times where, unfortunately, Ado got to drop out, and every time we said or ah. So Descript's going to take care of that puppy with artificial intelligence, of which I am super happy. So definitely, check out AI. Become, I think, the person that understands the technology. Take advantage. I'm a career switcher from like graphic design. So take advantage that this is a new age and that you can be the person in front of it, and you'll see that you won't have to worry about AIs taking your job. They'll be begging you maybe for work. So next time we have in the next show, we're talking about all the different roles that are available besides developers in data science and artificial intelligence. There's been definitely growth here. So if you are trying to figure out what your sort of place is in all this new technology, we invited Christina Stathopoulos, a data evangelist and advisor and educator. She worked for 5 years at Google with the Waze product, something that I use all the time whenever I'm driving. So, she led analytical studies and strategy in partnership with some of their largest advertisers, and she branched off as a data evangelist. So I'm really excited about that conversation and all the conversations I get to have with people like you, Ada. Thank you for even going over a little bit. I apologize for taking too much time, but great conversation. I had a ton of fun. Ton of fun. You're such a
Absolutely.
great
Yeah.
person to talk about AI with, and yeah, good having you. Take care.
Thank you so much, Ray. Bye, everyone.
Bye.